So welcome everyone to this event. This is our Keene London Lecture 2023. It's the second of these new annual lectures which form a highlight of the IHR's programme around urban, place-based and community histories. If this is your first time at the IHR or in Senate House, then you're especially welcome with us this evening. It's lovely to have you with us. I'm Catherine Clark. I'm a professor here in the Institute of Historical Research and I'm director of our Centre for the History of People, Place and Community. We're all looking forward to a wonderful lecture this evening with Stefan, but just before, wait a moment, before I hand over to him, I wanted to say just a few words about this event. So this evening's lecture is named in honour of our former colleague at the IHR, Professor Keene, who sadly passed away in 2021. Derek founded the IHR's world-renowned Centre for Metropolitan History, which continues its work today in our Centre for the History of People, Place and Community. Derek's research into historic cities was driven by a couple of core principles: an emphasis on interdisciplinary approaches, especially drawing on material culture, and a conviction that historical training and participation in history should be available to everyone, no matter their background. Working with communities and co-creating historical research remains central to what we do in our centre, including in projects like Layers of London, the product placement over there, the digital, map-based, crowdsourced history platform. You can find that online. This evening's lecture is also part of a very special week here at the IHR. It's our second ever IHR London Summer School, and this lecture forms a real highlight in this week. So after our inaugural year in 2022 with the broad theme of renewal, this year's theme has been Secret London. We've been exploring a range of topics from secret organisations, including the histories of MI5 and MI6, to the secrets of early medieval dark earth London, through to secret selves in diaries and mass observation. We're going on to look at secret lives of objects, hidden histories in London, including hidden histories of slavery in the urban landscape of the City of London. We've been on some special visits and tours, including a trip to the London Mithraeum and a secret intelligence tour of London, which obviously I can't tell you about. And we're delighted to be visiting the Bishopsgate Institute tomorrow, which I know will be a highlight of the week. So Stef's lecture tonight on LGBTQ+ histories, as well as the collections of the Bishopsgate Institute more widely, do intersect very meaningfully with our Secret London theme. From lives that sadly had to be hidden to today's pride and celebration. And I think the archive traces those stories beautifully. We'll be running our summer school again next year in 2024. And this is the big reveal moment, so I feel like I should have a big golden envelope. I'm really regretting now that I didn't think of that. The theme for next year's London Summer School is rivers. So, and everything from the Thames to London's lost rivers, from bridges and crossing spaces, to crossing places to social spaces, ceremony, docks, mudlarks. So I do hope some of you will join us for another week of fascinating discovery. And next year also, our summer school will be available as a credit-bearing University of London module as part of our shiny new master's programme. Right, that's all the preamble. Let's get to why we're really here this evening. Of course, it is an enormous privilege and pleasure to introduce Stef. So I think you all know Stefan is the Special Collections and Archives Manager at Bishopsgate Institute. He's been responsible for the development of the Institute's collections on the history of London, protest and activism, and LGBTQ+ Britain. He qualified as an artist back in 2001 and started at Bishopsgate in 2005. Before that, Stef worked in the archives of the London School of Economics and right here, well, over the other side of this building in Senate House Library. Stef regularly speaks to all kinds of groups, students, family, local history societies about what they can discover in the special collections at the Institute. He also has the most fantastic account on Twitter. I don't know if any of the rest of you follow Stef on that, because the other social media platforms are available. And I love the glimpses that we get in your account, Stef, of the Bishopsgate collections. Inspiring, courageous, sexy, funny, moving, such rich collections. Brilliant archive of everyday life and also the actions of people who have made change. So after Stef's lecture, he's very kindly said that he's going to make some time for questions and discussion. And then after that, there's a drinks reception upstairs, and you're all very warmly invited to join us for that. I've had the pleasure of hearing Stef speak before, as I'm sure many of you have, and I know we're in for a real treat this evening. So thank you so much, Stef, and over to you.
Let's get a round of applause before we do it. Yes, I did well. So first of all, thank you, Catherine, for inviting me. I feel very posh in that lecture. I don't want to get paid, a tenner just to talk to someone there. But no, it's wonderful to come and talk to you. There's nothing I like better than the sound of my own voice. You're in for at least 4 hours. What Stef got up to over 17 years. But no, it's wonderful to come and talk. And what I want to talk to you about today is tell you about the collections we've got, but also about the theories, about how they were put together. And basically, if you could subtitle this, it would be what happens when you give an archivist far too much freedom in special collections. Because basically, most of what you're going to see is down to all the wonderful depositors who trusted us with their material, but it's my fault to sneak it in the back door when no one's looking. And it's been an incredible journey. I've been there 17 years now at this place, the Bishopsgate Institute. Now, who's heard of it? Pretty much everyone. That's good. Who's heard me speak before? Oh, shit. Because it's basically the same joke. I'll try to put a couple of new ones in there for those who are well seasoned listeners. But just to tell you a bit about, for those of you who don't know, the Institute, 130 years it's been there, set up by the church and Botos Bishopsgate across the road. Oh, I'm sure they'll be fine with everything that's happened as we go on. This is us when we first opened, this is us now, proudly waving the progress flag outside, though we are not a political building. And the Institute set up as a cultural centre of education, learning, courses, education, and a library. This is what it looks like. This is 1914. It still looks pretty much the same, really. You go in there. People walk in and go, do it smell like the library? Which I think is good. I'm not quite sure. But this is what it looks like. But don't let it mislead you. I mean, one of the first things I did when I arrived in 2005 was to take down all the Dickensian oil paintings of London, I'm sorry, and replace them with, pictures of the interior of the gay leather bar, the back street, etc. As you do, I like the juxtaposition of what's going on there. But the Institute has started off as a lending library, but has given its librarians too much freedom over the years. The first one, a gentleman called Charles Guss, developed our collections on London history and radical history. I've taken on subsequent librarians, added to it as well. And when I came to the Institute in 2005, it wasn't until 2011 I got really my chance to do what I'd been thinking about for a long time, which was to establish an LGBTQ+ archive at the Institute. Now, I've worked at other archives before that shall remain nameless. LSE. And next door had an amazing time at the LSE. It's brilliant, amazing collections, amazing place to work. I always thought when I was working with the Hall Carpentry archives there, just little bits of the change, I got the chance to do it slightly different. So very foolishly, they let me put this into place at the Institute, which is what we're talk about tonight, is some of the things that were behind my thinking about how we collect. So 2011 it all started. I got my first opportunity. I've been there 6 years. And I got a phone call from a group called the Lesbian and Gay News Media Archive. Now they were a group of wonderful volunteers who were running this archive down at Middlesex University. They were being booted out. I think they were dumping down a campus, changing it into something else. And they said, Stef, we decided the collection's going to come and live with you at Bishopsgate. I was like, okay. Why? 28 pages of A4 explaining why it should come to Bishopsgate. I was like, okay. They said it's only a small archive, won't take up much room. As the 13th filing cabinet came off the lorry, I was like, but it is an amazing collection because it is 350,000 plus press cuttings from the straight press about British LGBTQ+ history. Every subject you would ever imagine. Legislation, politics, activism, art, music, film, television. Every county in England has a file. It's always fun when people come in and see your dad and there not having much in there. They're like, section on London, there always is, and section on people as well. That's the activists and the community, people who've been artists, etc., and people who campaign against the community as well, every White House and things like that. But it's an amazing collection for a couple of reasons, and I was so delighted to take it. Once again, it was rejected from another archive because it's press cuttings. They're printed, it's not really an archive. But it's a community archive put together by the community for the community, which which is what makes it important. People from the community got involved with this, volunteers. Not only did they collect cut-ins from the 1970s, from the Campaign for Sexual Equality, from the papers at the time, they also went back through the old papers and collected on as well when things like the Greater London Council funded things to do with LGBTQ rights. And the fact they went back is very important. The fact it was people from the community doing it, because there's a lot of stories of two women leaving their husbands and marching up into the sunset, and the fact that doesn't continue to happen. In fact, they don't. And ask for any women's name. The fact this is done is not going to be done when this is all done. So the fact they did that is very important. Plus, it's one of the few insights we have into LGBTQ plus life until 1967. I'm sure you all know Sexual Offences Act, partial decriminalisation. I regularly get phone calls from TV companies saying we're making the most groundbreaking documentary on gay men in the 1950s. Have you got colour digital film footage we could use of gay men being gay in the 1950s? No. We're sort of relying on that. But this is one of the insights we can get to the community for a straight gay. So I thought I'd share with you some of my favourites on the call, as I always share. The sun can always be relied on to provide a very accurate depiction of. So you will find lots of headlines like this. The story is actually quite tragic, so we won't go any further than that. My personal favourite, if you come away from one lesson from this talk, let it be Happy Spot. 1963, Sunday Mirror, in a reaction to lots of spy scandals taking place, still servants being blackmailed to give away secrets because of their sexuality. Line of Crane of the Sunday Mirror publishes this very scientific article. I think it begins with, they could be anyone or could be anywhere. But just basically manages to divide gay men up into two types, the obvious and the concealed. Now, the obvious are those who dye their hair, touch up their lips and walk with a gay little wiggle. They could be spotted by a one-eyed Jack on a foggy day in the back of the tunnel. Gets more surreal. Concealed gay men will wear silk suits and sit up at cheeching bars with full bosom ladies. Also, like they also play golf. You see someone with silk suit and golf clubs. That's all I'm saying. An amazing, as you say, an amazing collection, but there obviously is stuff in there that's very disturbing and possibly, I would argue, a hate crime that should be prosecuted. Particularly what you see from the tabloid press around the HIV/AIDS crisis in the 1980s. And you'll see press clippings like this in there, which are disturbing, are absolutely scandalous. This was only 40 years ago. Support for people like this, a guy called Bill Brownhill, Sheffield councillor. This is what he said. And people like James Anderton, some of you may remember. So James Anderton, lovely fella. Yes, I'm not going to talk about him anymore because he doesn't deserve the space. But
he shut up when his daughter came out as a lesbian.
Yes, it's like if there is justice. And also in the collection, as it was particularly made by gay men, you do find lesbians with a little photo in there, actually. Lots of stuff about women, but also early stuff about gender non-conformity as well. And this is a consistent thing that we find in LGBTQ plus archives, is that there are a lot of stories that aren't there. And the fact that there are some of these stuff in there is good, but we'll come back to that in a minute. And this gave me the excuse for the Institute to start filing stuff in. It's now enshrined in our collection policy. It's the most used collecting area we have. Literally people coming in all the time looking at it. Most of them tend to ask for bloody badges. I don't know why. We have more badges than you would ever want. I love badges from all the prides, badges from different campaigns, gender activism badges, all sorts of ones you can imagine. I don't know if Gay Wales Against Racism have made it up there, but it's one of my favourites. And also badges making a comeback now. So we're getting lots more badges. The Institute has a badge maker. So we're making our own badge. We should put some badges along, sorry about that. Come and get one at the Institute. Yeah, we did have an event where people got a bit too carried away with slightly naughty badges. So, yeah, we have to keep an eye on it now. But badges are cool. We also have banners galore as well. So it's not just collecting the paperwork. This stuff has come in wonderful banners from different organisations. Hyde Park Gays and Sapphics, Speakers Corner in Hyde Park, Outrage, Age of Consent banners. Or if you do come into the Institute and ask for a banner, do not ask for this one. I beg you. I beg you, because it's come out once, it's never coming out again. This is our Great Hall, the biggest banner ever. I'm somewhere underneath. I think actually when we unravelled this, I got hit by a brick on top of my head as one came out of the unravelling. So there are these incredible things. A lot of this came with the press panes, but we've added to these areas subsequently. And you'll also find wonderfully in the collection a huge amount of books and pamphlets. So just give you an overview before we get into the sort of theoretical side of it. You'll find the Library at the Institute of, I don't know, 20 to 30,000 books and pamphlets now. Everyone you could ever imagine. Wonderful academic works. More editions of The Well of Loneliness than you would ever want. And all of the other very famous gay fiction books you would think of. But I particularly love the ephemeral nature of it as well as a library, which is particularly wonderful. So you will find in there pamphlets galore by various organisations. You'll find a lot of pulp fiction. So we have one here, like You Need Change, I think from the early 60s. And this wonderful pulp, all the best titles ever. I don't think we'll ever top Clockwork Orange. Like in all, but we ain't going to that. Also, gay guides galore as well. So it's more than just a book library. It has these wonderful print materials that tell you another side of the story as well. But something we're particularly proud of is the journals collection, as well as the Institute. I think the last count about 2,000 different journals. All the journals you would want come together, the Gay Liberation Front Journal, every edition of Gay News, Jeffrey, the wonderfully titled Jeffrey magazine, it was Jeremy before and then becomes Jeffrey with the J's. But also, as I was saying, a lot of gaps. The journal collection that we have has enabled us to fill a lot of these gaps as well. Because, you know, we have lots more stuff now about bisexuality, about trans history, but also not only that, but also about queer history and disability queer history, stuff coming into the collection. But we have some wonderful journals. The Gay Bicycle Association newsletter and stuff like this, it's amazing. And thank God for newsletters. What happened to newsletters? Not more newsletters, we'll take them in. But also engaging very much with the younger community as well, because there's a lot of zines in the collection now as well. And this has been quite a revolution, the fact that now people are publishing zines, self-publishing. I think the last couple of thousands of zines, Kerry's still got a catalogue and all yet, so yeah, I was going to embarrass you, Kerry. But wonderful, wonderful stuff. And we'll come back to more journals a bit later. But I also have to say, I always like to put this up, just before we go into this. You're going to be so disappointed. We do also have the largest collection of gay pornography in the UK. Someone had to do this job. So I'm taking it on for you. I'm actually going to go off that because I don't want to get you into trouble, Catherine. Oh, okay. Yes, we have more naughty magazines we don't mainly by male gay pornography. Everyone else tends to have something called an imagination, which means they don't need 500 copies of Zipper, but we have all 500 copies. Apart from number 447, not that nerdy. When I was got that, do see the art, but also don't have to go. But yes, you can see some of the imaginative titles that have been used over the years for some of the pornography. But this has led to some amazing, and I'm not going to say this to you, because you're all very clever and know it is very important to record this. What turns people on, what doesn't turn people on. I have young student groups come in and they go, why would you buy a magazine? Just go online. No. They become almost like a relic. But quite wonderful, and there's some incredible moments. I will tell you the legend of Scotch Willie in a minute, which is not to be missed. But you know how this changes and notions, and there's some incredible magazines, some for gay women as well. A magazine particularly called Quib, which is getting more use now than you would ever want. Literally bringing that up every other day. Yes. We'll come back to that. And there's been a recent film called The Rebel Dykes. I don't know if anyone's seen it, but everyone wants a bit of Quib now. They bring it up all the time. But stuff comes in all the time. I'm forever. You'll see me on my hands and knees in the library sorting through naughty magazines. I sometimes do worry as people come in and go, I'm researching my family history. They've been quite a long time now. Yeah, anyway, but no, people come in all the time delivering stuff, and you know, it might be stuff about other topics, but people will wander in. So I've got some stuff in the archive, which is what we love at Bishopsgate, that people can come in and deposit stuff. My favourite moment ever was an older gentleman came in. Must have been 90 kilos a day. Shopping trolley. Got some stuff in the archive. Carry back. Sandwich wrappers. stack of porn would be that big at the bottom of the door. I was not expecting that to be. What's your name, Willie? Yeah, of course it is. Thank you for that. Thank you, that's great. And he was like, every time you pass him, come in and say hello. No, you misunderstand me, Stef. This is a wee son. I'm Scottish, by the way. The tip of the iceberg, 3 transit vans later, quickly at Willie's house, all these naughty magazines in pristine condition. But what I particularly loved about that is, in the collection, we have a lot of magazines that are obviously LGBTQ magazines. In the collection as well, you'll find a lot of magazines that aren't. So Willie, for example, we've now added to add a lot of physique magazines. I'm sure some of you see these, the muscle magazines. We just contributed a lot of them to a wonderful exhibition at the Photographer's Gallery. I don't know if anyone saw it. Excellent exhibition called A Hard Man is Good to Find. Brilliant. But all these magazines called Magnifique and Man Around and all of those we want. And they won LGBT magazines. They published, which means physical strength. That was a good way to look at men in pants, if you were a gay man. And also things like films and filming, which was very much used in the personal columns for people to contact each other at the time. So not just explicitly stuff that maybe not, that is in there because of the context of how it's used as well. So incredible stuff. And we've now, thankfully, been able to accept the archives of lots and lots of the big organisations. So this sort of top level collecting. Which people donate to us, maybe because of our openness, but you'll find in the collections, archives of organisations, Stonewall, the Terence Higgins Trust, every type or every group you can think of, there is a presence in the archive. From the Gay Liberation Front to the Beaumont Society, with very early trans organisations, every group you can imagine, you'll find a presence in the archive, which is wonderful to do. Probably one of the most incredible archives being the archive of London Lesbian Gay Switchboard, and then the Switchboard, the LGBTQ+ archive. Their archive came to us about 7 years ago, involved me hanging backwards out of the loft at my finest moment. I did it all for you. And in their loft were the records of this organisation from their foundation in 1974, right through to the present day. But quite wonderfully, it was their minutes, their documents, the records of this organisation set up as a helpline run by volunteers to take calls from the community. But in there were also 100 of these. These are switchboard workbooks. I don't think they knew these were in there until we opened the boxes. Because every time a volunteer received a phone call on switchboard, they would make a note of the phone call in these books. And there are 100 of them from 1974 to 2003. And as you can imagine, these are a microcosm of British LGBTQ+ history. They tell you what the community is thinking, its concerns, moments of joy, moments of sadness, they are all in there. Particularly wonderful, excellent comedy in there as well. Some of the best jokes I've ever heard, some of the best bitching I've ever heard in my life. You get people together, it's going to end up. But wonderful stories in there, particularly powerful around HIV/AIDS, as you can imagine. Switchboard very quickly becomes one of the leading organisations offering advice to people. Organises that we picked the first, or where we wanted to do first, conferences on HIV at Conway Hall with the Gay Medical Association in 1983. And you'll find this story of how it becomes more and more knowledgeable and more armed how to give information to people. But incredible history. And if you've not listened to it, do listen to the Logbooks podcast on Spotify or whatever you fancy, because it's a wonderful podcast you can listen to where people who volunteered or interviewed and talked about LGBTQ+ history through their involvement with the switchboard. So do have a look. But one of the real big things I wanted to do at the Institute was to open up the archives to everybody. So everybody can put their history in, whoever they are. If they identify as LGBTQ+, their archives are welcomed at the Institute. And to tell you the truth, this has led to some of the most powerful, amazing things that we have in the archive. Some of the most funny things we have in the archive. I've got to show you a few. Amazing stories come in all the time. A very famous National Museum got in contact. Of course, I'm very, discretion is my middle name, so I wouldn't tell you what Science Museum. We found some photo albums of a bloke we think is gay. I was like, really? I couldn't resist it. I was like, why do you think he's gay? I was like, hold up, Gene, what do you think he's gay? What's in there? Not many clues on it. I was like, probably. They sent these 28 photo albums over. They were going to throw them in the bin. But they said, oh, we'll see Stef, he'll take anyone. And I took them in, they came here, and they were incredible. We worked out who they belonged to. They belonged to this gentleman here, a guy called Russell Watkin, who lived out in North London. God knows how they got to the Science Museum. But they documented his life from his school days to his service in India in the Second World War to the 1960s when he was a bit of a bumper man about town, no time with the best parties, Russell was there, and was international salesman for Lion's ice cream, which enabled him to go around the world selling ice cream, but also having sex with everything that moved by the look of it so well, because they are full of Russell's conquests, all named. So I didn't put too many of them up, but etc. And they go right through to the end of his life in the 1980s and 1990s as well. Now, to me, this is the kind of thing that really moves me and I love bits. This is a record that was not classified, but this is a record of an extraordinary life, lived in extraordinary times when this man's life was illegal. He didn't shy away from having fun, and we have this record now of this life lived to the full. I mean, God, 1980s in Ibiza, Russell's not stopping. He's having a whale of a time. So I really, really love these kind of things. And people were now walking in with all sorts of wonderful things. Someone came in with their pulling jumper from heaven. I was like, really? There was a long talk about, oh, it's by this designer, blah, blah, blah. I was like, yeah, you can tell I'm a bit of a fashion person. So they said, oh, well, I always wore this jumper at heaven, I always got lucky. I thought, broke down the story, told us about it, we recorded that. I mean, how long could you wear that in heaven? You know, to him, that was what was important. And we'll come back to this, because another thing that's increasingly becoming important with how we collect is what we collect. Because not everyone has paper and documents. And when I went to archive school, they were like, yeah, I only ever work with paper and photography. This has not been the case. Because I don't know if I went around the room and said, what would you put in the archive? It might be a photograph, it might be a diary, it might be a pair of trainers. And I think it's important to let people record how they would record themselves. Because as a community that's been marginalised, has not been allowed to express or record itself, you know, I'm up for letting people record how they want. You know, you can't be when someone walks in a bag and Monopoly, can you? It's been sat on the side for years, I'd rather you had it. I mean, it's rubbish. It's worth going. You're led around the board by Alligator up here. Of its time, it's American, unfortunately, so not London. So you go around the Castro and Bristol Street. You don't go to jail, you become heterosexual, obviously. The worst thing that could ever happen. But as I say, these kind of things that aren't what you think, you know, could be museum items, but it's very much crossing over at the moment and how it's affected in this particular area. There's some incredible stories come in as well, and some are really moving. Someone walked in with their Uncle Bill's, Uncle Bill's diaries one day. And I was like, oh, okay, because we run a big project, collects diaries as well, diaries. But they walked in with their Uncle Bill's diaries. This is Bill here, and this is Doug. I said, oh, yeah, Bill, Uncle Bill. Comes to the right place. He used to live in Brixton. With his pal, Doug. Everything is still at Brixton. From about 1941 to about 1971, and I was like, what? Because some of you know, we don't have this kind of documentation. You know, this stuff before 1967, this kind of record is very, very rare. So when this came in, I was like, very excited. It's Doug's diaries from the 40s, 1945, 1947. I read through, I put a tweet out. Oh, do come in and look at these diaries we've discovered. You know, I'm not saying there's anyone here that responded, but if you like, I'm coming in. Don't let that academic in before I get that on the scene. Then I had to read, they are the most boring diaries I've ever read. Potatoes are soggy. Doug does not clean his shoes. Again. And on it goes. And then part of me initially went, but then part of me went, this makes them even better in a way, because very easily I fell into the trap of gay men, life 1940s, trilbies, back alleys, Ferrari, etc. This is a record of a couple in love, thankfully evading any persecution and jail time, but just living their life day to day. It could be two men, it could be two women. just living this life. And it's this wonderful record of a mundane everyday life. It's great. And let's see if I can make you cry, because Doug does pass in 1971. And Bill keeps on taking the diary, but ends every single day with the same two phrases. Good night, Doug. God bless you. And unfortunately, Bill passes away a bit later. But these incredible records pop up. And where we've been collecting like this, more and more amazing stuff's coming forward, where people are finding things, they're getting in contact. And literally hot off the press, something really quite amazing and magical, but also quite emotional happened recently. So I'm sure some of you are very familiar with Operation Spanner. 1990, 16 men prosecuted for taking part in various consensual S&M parties for over a number of years. Obscene Publication Squad found a tape, blah, 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 taken to court. We were all consenting. Consent isn't an excuse. And 8 of the men were convicted to various prison sentences. Scandalous moment in British history. So these are the men that were part in court. I got a phone call from someone who lived in Bolton, and they just bought a house in Horwich, just outside Bolton. And they said, God, it was a right day, it was a 10. We're doing a bit of work on it. So we bashed down one of the walls, and in the walls were a big stack of negatives this big. So we did a bit of research, this person, went through all the old records, found out the person that lived in this house before him was a gentleman called Graham Cadman. Yeah. One of the people that was sent to prison under Operation Spanner. And he had bricked these negatives into the wall that his police was being, his house was being laid by the police. We've now scanned these negatives, and they are innocent stuff. But you can imagine this man was so terrified that he was going to be taken to court, convicted on this, that these were hidden in the wall. And as they stood there, a couple brought them down. We looked through, we've now scanned them. I mean, there's a few bits in there, you're just going to be on there, but very innocent stuff. As we were sat there, the person went, my brother's just knocked down the fireplace. He found a load of letters bricked up in the fireplace. And the letters have now arrived. These are some of the letters here. And they're love letters to another man from Brian. All torn in half, but kept. Very interesting, the emotional state of this man at the time, which is really made me very emotional to see this. And we now, thankfully, have, hopefully, by providing archives that illuminate this case, can say, don't let this happen again. So we now are fortunate to have the archives of this gentleman here, Roland Jagger, who's one of the men sentenced. We have records of him taking all the case to the European Court of Human Rights. We have the archives now of this gentleman here, Alan Oversby, who was also known by his more familiar name, Mr. Sebastian, and was probably the most famous gay tattooist and piercer at the time. I couldn't show you any pictures, unfortunately, from this archive because it is quite rude. Very famous for his wings. When it comes to but an amazing collection, recording once again, a very interesting subculture as well. So incredible things coming in all the time. The fact that they got to us was really, we're doing something right here. That people know to bring this to us. I mean, the bed was a bit of a shock, to say the truth. I have to say, when I walked in with this double bed, my colleagues were like, but let me explain. We mentioned Rebel Dykes. Amazing film about this wonderful group of queer women in the 80s, 90s, radical, lived in squats, artistic projects, went to clubs like Chain Reaction, rolled in mild, had fun, very punky at the time, very sex positive. And the film's been made, do watch it if you haven't seen it, but one of them passed away, unfortunately, before the film came out. A wonderful woman called Ali, incredible story, mixed heritage, did lots of work in the community with kids, etc., on getting to ride motorbikes. We went round, a friend said, you need to record her. We went round, big tickets, love letters, diaries, badges. As I'm walking out, the wonderful woman, Jo, walked me around there and said, take a look, she forgot the bed. She goes, you take the bed. What's happened in the bed? He goes, well, you don't take the bed, you're not taking anything else. I think I'll have the bed. Now, she was quite scary, so I was like, that bed is a London lesbian art. There's more women that have more pleasure. I was like, I'll take the bed. Actually, saying nothing, but I'll take the bed. So you can imagine me walking in the bed like this. Now, unsure about this. I take lots of people down at the Institute, down into the strong rooms. I would say 8 women have walked past and gone, "Is that Abby's bed?" Yeah, no go. So I remain convinced. I thought she just didn't want to hire a removal company. But once again, this letting people tell their own stories, to them, this was what needed to be recorded about this person's history. So it's letting people tell their stories all over the way. Don't know what's going on. Very quickly, lots of photography as well. Now, if I ever do get a archiving night, does such thing exist? I don't know, maybe it should. It would probably be for this archive here. The archive, an incredible gentleman called Robert Workman. And he was a photographer at Gay News, the major gay publication. Bob was their photographer from about 1975 to 1983. Now, I'd heard the legend of the Gay News photo archive. Now, like the Loch Ness Monster, someone would say, "Oh, I saw it once in Manchester. I saw it in Liverpool. I saw it in Brighton." But no one could ever pinpoint it. Apparently, it turns out it got flooded and destroyed, so there's tears, it's upset, it's the record of the community at that time. But I've got a friend, or had a friend on Facebook, who is not Brazilian. And I would go for Gay News all the time, noticed all the pictures were taken by Bob Workman. And all the pictures of him singing opera on Facebook were taken by Robert Workman. And I was like, I don't suppose it could be. Because can you ask Robert Workman if he's not Workman? Well, yes, he is. And he's got 60,000 negatives of every picture he ever took for Gay News. And he's happy to donate those to the Institute. So this is probably the most fun archive I've ever done. I sit here scanning endlessly all these pictures. And they are incredible. They tell us every moment. So you have Pride recorded, for example. This is the one time it moved to Huddersfield. A gay club called the Gemini was closed down. The community went there in solidarity. Wonderful moments like this. Festival of Shite, obviously. Festival of Lights. Groups that I think should definitely make a comeback, captured by Bob. This is the Cycle Sluts. I'm sure you're all very aware of those. I think this was like 10 o'clock on a Monday morning. Bob took me there as a promotional shot in West London. But this incredible stuff. But what I love about it is the prides, marches, etc. It's the celebrities, the things. But he was also at some quite amazing moments of joy as well. This is, Bob was at the opening night of Heaven on the 14th of December, 1979. He was there with his camera taking pictures. Should have been dancing, but amazing stuff like that. And also hidden histories as well of London. Bob went to all of these events called Gina Fredericks' Porchester Balls, which were a very early drag event at the time. Sort of, I suppose, RuPaul's Drag Race, back from about 1975. And what it tells you these hidden histories as well. You know, because it is a diverse, hugely incredible, inclusive event, all sorts of different people there, having an amazing time at this Porchester Ball in the 1970s. So just incredible. And we've gone on to record more photography as well. Gordon Rainsford, who took over from Bob, we have his photography from Section 28 demos, from Age of Consent demos, very much documenting the HIV/AIDS crisis as well, campaign groups, ACT UP and Outrage, also a lot of the vigils that took place, and wonderful moments such as the canonisation of Derek Jarman by the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. But you know, also Gordon, you know, he's got a camera, of course I'm going to end up in the club, so I don't know why I like this picture so much, but one of my personal favourites. So this is Cathy de Paris in the 90s. So he was there all the time. Very quickly, I'm going to speed on because I know I'm going on, but one of the most incredible collections, which has changed a lot of the way we archive at the Institute as well, is this collection here, the Museum of Transology Archive, which arrived at the Institute about 4 years ago now, and has really been an incredible archive, not only for adding to the collection of trans, gender non-conformity, non-binary, and sex histories, but also in the way that we think about archives at the Institute. It was set up in 2014 by an academic called E.J. Scott, who is trans themselves, basically determined that trans people need their voices in archives. Because whenever there was a collection about gender non-conformity, trans history, it was normally put together by someone who wasn't trans, and it would be a medical tape, a very salacious tape. And went out, started collecting objects from the community. People could donate an object and fill in a tag saying why they wanted that item to be in the collection. And it's full of some of the most interesting, maybe unusual items you could ever think of. Picked 3 here, but I mean, it is the only collection you have all the links to your drink can in, I'll just say that. But wonderful stuff you might think is mundane every day, but the fact that these tickets tell the stories behind them, make them really powerful moments. For example, a train ticket. This was the ticket I used to meet my Canadian girlfriend. First time seeing her in person as a boyfriend instead of a girlfriend in the maze of either. Blue stud earring. I'm giving up my blue stud earring. It's very special to me. I wanted to write trans pride, first one ever, which is a great big deal for me. This lipstick was from my wonderful sister, who's the first family member to accept me and support my transition. So these items become very, very powerful very quickly. And the first collection we have human tissue in as well. So someone donated their top surgery to the collection. This wasn't obviously just a case of putting it in the box. This took a bit more work than that. And was sent off and came back, and the tag just says wonderfully thanks for the memories, which was like, okay, that's great. But it's also a line of radical archives. It's been added to all the time. Some of you may have seen on Twitter as well. You can imagine my joy at 9 o'clock on Saturday nights when I was at work. Then all the black knowledge from Saturday's trans pride arrived. So they're all being added to the collection as well. Unfortunately, the community is facing a lot of discrimination at the moment. There's a lot of placards coming in because there's a lot of need for demonstrations. So all these placards are going in. But also it's a community that engages, archive engages the community as well. So we've been having Regular Museum of Transology Archive in Lanes, which lets people come in and catalogue material in the collection themselves. So they can come in, not only to get archive skills, but also just a space to meet up, get together, have a laugh, look through stuff, which is really good. And hopefully from that, people will go on and get the archive up. And the one thing the archive needs is a bit more diversity in the archive sector. So hopefully that's good, but I love the fact that it's sort of engaging everyone. Very quickly, moments of joy in the archive I was determined to have as well. Every archive I tend to work with was a lot of protest and oppression and anger. So you'll find in the collection archives of Stonewall FC football team, London Gay Men's Chorus, performance groups like Ducky, Transfabulous, Blue Lips, wonderful stuff. You'll find one person's collection of over 400 sauna cards. We've had a good time all over the world, every sauna ever. More club ephemera than you would ever find as well. Every club you could ever imagine. So that fun and joy as well as oppression. And live archiving as well. We're out there collecting all the time. So literally, these banners arrived last week, and they were held up at Pride this year by a group called Lesbian Investable for migrants. So it's about engaging with groups that are taking place now, rather than waiting for someone to have it in a back room and go, oh, actually, you should put that in archive. And we have photographers that go out and record events, Trans Pride and Saturday, for us to put in the archive all the time. So about being very aware and being out there collecting as things are happening as well. Last but not least, we have gone a bit kinky. Anyone who's been to the Institute will notice from the gibbet cage in the researchers area and the spanking bench next to the researcher's desk that you've not walked into the most normal archive in the world ever. Let me take it back to 2016. I got a call from the guy in Birmingham who said, are you Stef? I was like, yeah. The other archives turned me away, but they said to speak to you. I used to run a leather rubber fetish club for gentlemen in the Birmingham area for about 25 years. I'm downsizing to a small bungalow in the Edgbaston area. And, I've got a garage full of gear I need rid of. So I was like, I'll send it down tomorrow. Went down, we're all there. Got an open up records of a group called Midland Link Motorsports Club. Operated in the Birmingham area called a motorsports club. If you're booking the town hall for a fetish event, Birmingham fetish men doesn't go down too well with it. So you're a motorsports club, hence you're all in leather because you just got on the bike. Open up the box, the most intricate minutes I've ever seen. Minutes of volleyball preparation subcommittee for Ken's birthday next week at the Green Dragon. But some wonderful record of this group that were formed in the early 1970s, for gay and bisexual gentlemen interested in this kind of stuff. And once again, one big thing about the Institute, I've probably mentioned this already, is that we are able to take these risks. We are an independent charitable foundation. I always imagine if I went to, I don't know, maybe I'll get away with it, up to University of London Dean and said, a couple of ideas to collect the largest collection of smut in the UK, get out. Once start up the UK level, get out. But the Institute, we can take these risks and record these histories. And after the middle of the link, I got a phone call from the guy who ran MSC London, the guy who ran MSC Scotland, the guy who ran Extangler Bikers, and we started the UK level archive to record this kind of history. And it's now spread out, so the whole of the LGBT community who identifies people will find a presence SMGs, Dykes on Bikes, etc., are all finding a home for their archive material at the Institute. Wonderful moments of joy. Imagine me last year, what was it, 2 years ago? The back street closed down, the oldest gay leather bar in London, just beyond my own station. I had 2 hours to get in there. Do you remember the hottest day of the year, 42 degrees? Me on the hands and knees in the back street leather club, grabbing as much as I could. They said, how many pair of boots do you want? I said, how many you got? Like 400. We'll take 2, so we have boots, t-shirts, and the gibbet case and the stocks. So it's quite good for current readers in this day. But rescuing this iconic place and stuff here. And once again, I'm going to end very quickly. People bring stuff in all the time to this collection because they now realise that their history is valid and important and wants to be recorded. So you can imagine my joy. Someone walked in one day and goes, I ain't got anything any good, but I've got this. And it was a photocopy of this press panel from 1979. And it was an expose on the group called Motorsports Club London. And they were the big motorsports club in London. And the News of the World decided to interrupt their meeting. So let me have a read by Trevor. In 27 years investigating corruption, these are the vilest men I've ever met. This is a shock report and does not make pleasant reading. I found out there would have been a meeting at the group called MSC London. I purchased tickets, went out on Friday night, got the bar, left after the pub, went down some stairs in the lock-up garage number 27. We went down the hatchway and our tickets were inspected by 2 men dressed head to toe in leather. It was 11:45. And we were about to witness the most horrific scenes of homosexual depravity known to man. Packed by about 100. The atmosphere was frankly terrifying. Trevor still stays. Everything that goes on. And luckily enough, brought his friend Andrew. And described, in detail what went on. And I was like, oh God, this must have been terrible. He was like, long enough this went in, we had about 500 phone calls. Can we find out what the next mechanism was? It was the best PR we ever had. Homosexual depravity was all the rage. So wonderful stuff like this and stories. And last but not least, it's about the Institute celebrating their histories of the court. Their histories that might not be celebrated elsewhere. When we started the fetish archive, for example, spoke to colleagues at the well, we got lots about fetish. I said, you look at it in a certain way. You look at it as a psychological aberration. We look at it as a celebration of the people and the things they're into. So every opportunity to celebrate the archives we hold, we do. They're there not just as things and dusty things, they're things to inspire, to make people create, to write amazing books. So every opportunity we do get, I'd like to end with one of my favourite ones with all sorts of ventures here. But let me just take you back to 2017. This is one of my favourite moments. I'll end with this. We've just started the Leather Archive, so we thought we'd have a little bash. So it was London Leather Weekend. So on Saturday, after a heavy night at the back street on Friday, the guys could either go on a boat trip down the Thames, or they could come and look at the UK Leather Archive. Luckily, Lux came and looked at the UK Leather Archive. Mr. Leather Italy brought his mum, which I thought was a very touching moment. And 2 things happened. One guy cried, and I was like, oh God, he's that every night. He went, no, Stef, no. It's very emotional for me. Because I grew up ashamed of being queer. I grew up ashamed of being kinky. And now I'm seeing a place that's celebrating who I am. And letting everyone see it. And he couldn't quite believe this has happened. So I started crying, obviously, as well. But then the best moment was yet to come. A colleague ran in. I didn't realise we booked the event on, we had a big great hall as well, where we'd also booked the nationwide ballroom dancing. So you can imagine they'd already been quite a camporama as like 50 sequin ballroom dancers came down one end of the corridor and 50 geared up over them all down the other way. But colleague came and said, Stef. There's been an incident in the ballroom dancing. One of the ballroom dancers has accidentally punched another ballroom dancer in the face just as they were about to compete against each other. I was like, okay, is there a medical person here? And I was like, oh, yes. And luckily, one of the lab members, yes, I'm a cardiologist. So off he went running down the corridor. I followed slightly slower behind, got to the front, and I just want to leave you with one image. a fully geared up man holding a sequin ballroom dancer. I was like, can't take but things like that happen at the Institute. It's a place to celebrate stuff that is a fun place to come and visit. We're also completely accessible, which I think is very important. You should be able to wander into an archive and explore your history, which you can do at the Institute. Come and see us Monday to Friday, 10 to 5. I've given you a bit of a theory about how it goes. It's not an academic lecture, in fact, like not at all, but hopefully it's been quite fun. I'll take any questions. Please be kind, because I've had quite a hard day. Yeah, I hope that was something interesting.
Absolutely gorgeous. It was every bit as joyful and moving as I was expecting it to be. Stef, really wonderful to hear about, and it's just the ultimate model of a community-built archive that is open to everyone. I love the way you articulated that emphasis on people telling their own stories the way they want to, whether it's with badges or newsletters or placards or their pulling jumper or their bed, whatever that might be. And some really, really moving stories in there. Russell's gorgeous photo album and those letters, as you said, the letters bricked in the fireplace that have been torn into and yet also carefully kept as well. That just speaks of such a kind of precious story. So such rich and multi-layered stories that you surfaced for us from the archive, and I love the way that you ended with that emphasis on celebration that really seems to run through everything that the Bishopsgate Institute and the archive does. So just absolutely wonderful, thank you. We have time for some questions before we crack open the wine upstairs, and I know there will be lots of questions. So I was wondering whether perhaps I could ask an IHR colleague to be a kind of roving mic. Lighting is important. So please raise your hand if you would like to ask the question of Stef. And while the mic is getting ready to rove, I wanted to ask a question. I loved what you said about it was the porn magazines, I think, and you were saying that young people are saying, why would you look at a mag? Why don't you just go online? And I wanted to ask how the kind of move to digital, what the implications of that are for your collecting, and are there kind of sort of power artifacts, things that move alongside the digital that you would kind of collect because they're material, but they speak to the digital world, how that has impacted on the kind of materials you collect and how, because I love the materiality of your archive, you know, whether it's the leather or the badges.
I mean, we don't get an archive now that's not a hybrid of digital and physical, because obviously, you know, it's been around for a long time and people have been doing it. So everything in the industry is treated the same. So whether it be digital or physical, you come and look at digital stuff on the computer, but obviously there's a lot more digital things to think about, migrating formats and stuff like this. I'm quite old, so I tend to leave it to my colleagues who are a bit younger. And you know, but when someone comes in with a memory stick, I'm still trying to get us excited. Something out. But then you look at this and making photography or this, you know, incredible. So very much that's part of the process that we do now. It's also digital archiving. There's lots of interesting things when I'm thinking about how these could be archived as sort of objects in themselves. So we're on a promise, and someone said you need to record my friend's Apple Mac computer because it's got the filthiest letters in the world on it, but we can't get them off it. Do you want the computer? This is the computer. Objectives. So we will probably accept that, and I might keep the computer as some kind of, you know, relic of how that was done. Apparently, some bloke in Swindon who can get everything off an Apple Mac. It is shocking this, so I'm going to be really annoyed. But so there is like this concept of, you know, how, and also how communities connect with each other as well is very interesting and organised. So very much with some of the more protest archives, you know, we get a lot now. You need to record our Microsoft Messenger feed. I'm like, no. So it's how to do that. But also how groups communicate, for example, like the leather groups, you know, print newsletters. We don't create a newsletter anymore. And then, you know, you get some smart ass who go, well, you can ask our grinder. I'm like, oh, no, not really. But, you know, so there's lots of challenges, I think, that some we're aware of. I mean, I'm very much in that similar, like, materiality of how things are done as well. But lots of challenges that I think the archive profession itself has yet got to get into grips with, let alone a small collections.
We need to swap round. I should be
Okay.
standing there. You should be standing there. Have I standing at the side? Thank you, Stef. Got a question in the middle here. Thank you. Me?
Yeah. Thank you. I wanted you to say a little bit, Stefan, about funding and how, with this wonderful, constantly expanding set of collections and new interests and new donors, that means a lot of space and always getting bigger. And I wondered how you have, and when you first began to expand,
Yeah.
I know it's a city
Yeah.
foundation, so presumably that's some funds, but
It's still,
there have been some ups and downs, I remember.
it's always ups and downs, and there's always, you know, moratoriums and stuff. I mean, the Institute is financially secure, which is, the way I talk about collections, I'm always very conscious that I talk from a position of financial security as well, because a lot of archives pounds are begging for a box to put stuff in, you know, it's been been expanded for quite some time, as you know, physically, but also archivally as well. So I went to the Institute. That's been a gradual accumulation of rooms. Now, the facilities lads don't need that room in the back. You know, we'll put a humidifier in there and put some shelves up. So, but I think it's also been a change of how the Institute views the archives it holds. So it's always been a big part, but I think it's become bigger and bigger in the core of what the Institute does in its identity. So in terms of inspiring the events we do, the courses we do, we still live on that money people left to the church over 500 years that was told to be used constructively in the 1880s for something philanthropic. When I say money, I mean, it was like, you know, people leaving half-acre of swap land to the church in Aldgate in 1584, you know, it's not like, you know, it's a couple of quid. And that's now looked after by the Charity Commission, so we do okay. But you never find an archivist librarian with some more shelves, you know that. We've all got football stuff in. I'm hoping I retire before it becomes a critical issue. By which time everything
all
will be
remind you quite soon.
I've got my eyes on the Great Hall.
You heard it in first.
Shh.
Hi, thanks for the talk, it was really interesting. So I don't really know much about archiving at all, so maybe this is a basic question. But I was interested in whether there's any difficulty navigating some of the ethical stuff about, you know, especially using people's diaries and letters and things, and you use the example of the Apple map where like you can't get the emails off. So I'm interested in how you navigate that, or if you have any challenges with it.
All the time. So we're very hot on data protection and people being able to be who they are and reveal them as they want to be in the archives. So we're always very conscious of how we do it. You know, if there's membership lists in an organisation, we'll close those for a certain period of time. With some of the diaries, you know, there is ethical issues. They're of a certain age now, those diaries particularly, and their consent be given to us to be made available. Some other stuff is like, it will be available, but not at the moment. So we're always very aware of that kind of thing, which seems to work out fine. There's certain things we can't that are very tricky. I've had people get in touch saying, a friend of mine is now back in the closet, but he was on the front page of Capital Day every other week. I can't close Capital Day. It's there. But I think more the tricky thing you have is maybe changing use of terminology, changing notions of what's acceptable and not acceptable, and just making sure that younger generations are aware that things have changed and terminology that was used is not derogatory as what was at that time, you know. But very keen of the Institute for everything to be open. I went to a conference once on controversial archives, challenging archives. They said, well, it might Stef because it's got anthropological mags, that'd be challenging. And they said, oh God, it must be terrible with the stuff that those new bodies. That's great. Well, we catalogue it all the graphic magazines, pictures of people shooting each other in the back of the head personally, but you're like, wow. But you know, I want things to be open. I want people to see the challenges. I want people to see the sexy. I want people to see, you know. So we try and make everything as available as possible. And like, oh, you have to put some potential warning on things, and we do. But I'm not going to stop someone looking at something because I think it might be a thing now. So there are these challenges all the time that we have to think about. But we try and be as open as possible and warn where we can, but not go. I'm recommending you should, because it's not my place to do it. That attempts a submission.
Hi, and thank you so much. That was fantastic. Really interesting. I may have misunderstood you, but I got the impression that you are taking things in that people are bringing to you, but you're also actively collecting. And I just wondered what your process was of identifying what you think is important to collect and the extent to which the community that you are collecting for informed that process.
Both. So as collecting, we approach people, and more now, people coming forward to us. I'm very aware. People always say, "Oh, you know, when you go to art festival, they're like, you mustn't be political." I had to write an essay on the history of the National Health Service without mentioning any views whatsoever. So what I do in every shape and form is political. What comes in is my decision. It reflects my interests and what I'm into. You know, I try and be open, but I'm a person who's going to be, which is why I think it's so important to let people document themselves in the archive rather than me telling someone, going in their house and going, no, maybe, no. You know, let people document themselves. I think, well, I'm not a trans person, you know, I want to tell you don't get a trans person or an old trans person what's important about their lives. They tell me. So I think that is always in my mind. But people say, oh yeah, it's very political stuff. Why haven't you got any of the LGBT Alliance stuff in the archive? The other side, I said, because I don't want it. Yeah, but you're not recording history properly. I'm like, I don't care. I'm not going to lie. Say, you know, oh no, we're very open here. No, it's completely political. From, you know, the access policies to what we collect. So, and I'm not going to put things in the archive that are going to make people whose histories I'm responsible for caring or uncomfortable or feel at risk.
Yeah, thank you. Are you in contact with any other archives on an international level? Because I'm from Berlin and we have like quite a number of queer archives from like all sort of different backgrounds. And I can imagine that it might be quite fruitful to get in touch and discuss.
Oh yeah, no, we speak when we can. I'm forever trying to get, you know, first class flights to Berlin. So we can just also probably. But no, we do speak to the Shrewsbury Museum and talk to other people as well, and you know, exchange ideas and do swapsies, which is good. I've got some of this duplicate. Should I send them? Will you send me something? So yeah, we try and also network as much as we can, but also with other places in the UK as well that collect. So yeah, I think it's important.
Hi, thanks so much for a great talk. This is a totally frivolous question.
That's good.
What would you love to get your hands on that you haven't yet?
I don't know, it's tricky. It's very tricky. I want to say something really profound, but it's just going to be like, oh. No, it's not going to be. I don't know. I mean, there's things, obviously, people, you know, I'd quite like to, like, a few more musical things come in. I think there's this incredibly important, quite political musical moments in the 80s. You know, your Jimmy Sackville's and your, you know, your Red Wedges and all this stuff going on. So I'd quite like to record that a lot more than we do at the moment. But it's quite hard to contact like pop stars. Can I hear archives? They're like, we're fan here. Or what would you know? So that'd be quite interesting. We have the Hazel Dean's archive now, which is not amazing. I think everyone knows Hazel Dean. Yeah, Surgeon. Yeah. So I think expanding out would be something I'd be really passionate about into some areas that I'm expressing political music.
can I sneak in a question that kind of builds on that? So, and you touched on this briefly in your talk. What is your sense of the kind of where the gaps are in the archive? That you mentioned a few that you're kind of actively looking to sort of to fill. Could you say a bit more about the gaps that you see there and how you're going about trying to fill those absences?
There's huge gaps we'll never be able to fill in, you know, and a lot of history that will always be speculative now because we haven't got. So, you know, one of the things that half works us in the Institute is when we get students come in very excited. I want to do my dissertation on lesbian RAF pilots. Yeah. But can I look at original documents and you're like, so there are sort of gaps historically, but I think now it's more gaps that you would probably think of. So in the full wonderfulness of the community. So you know, where's the bisexual history, where's the asexual history, where's the non-binary history, and then you know, black queer history, disability queer history. So there's lots of gaps. I hope by getting the collections out there, we can do more to engage with people, to give their archives in. But you know, by the kind of collecting we do, I hope it encourages people to consider themselves important enough to archive, because everyone's important, as we know, and I can't work anyone else. So tell everyone to just send me a box.
I think the Institute does such, the archive does such important work in terms of helping ordinary people, like all of us, understand what an archive can be. That's something we saw with Layers of London, that there were approaches from people saying, "There's a suitcase under our bed. It's just, don't know what, you know, do you want it? Is it something we'd be interested in?" And it's the archives of a community group over years and years. So different kinds of archives we want to collect. But I think the fact that we're getting these calls from right across the country, as you say, shows the success of the work you're doing in terms of people recognising the value of what they have as, you know, archive material, and their recognition that you're the place that will treasure it and cherish it and preserve it.
I think it's that on the one hand, but I think also there's an increasing awareness of archives and history and the value of people history. And I do love the fact that archivists aren't the only people who archive anymore. So you don't have to be an archivist to do your archive anymore, you can just do yourself. It really pisses off probably the course and you see how over the road. Sorry, you know, we haven't gone through a year yet. But you know, you don't have to be an archivist to archive your group, your pals, you know, now. You know, yes, they provide systems you might have to do it on, but you know, archivists don't have special knowledge. They just study through here. And that's what things are. Sorry. Well, I did when I do it, you do computers and that now. I do computers. But yeah, moving outside of people. Yeah.
I wanted to ask, at various moments you talked about your feeling, everyone, you know, teariness around particular moments, you know, kind of particular positions, and also the kind of feeling of people who are donating. I wondered how you deal with that, because that's a lot of feeling in a space, isn't it? And how you, whether there's an afterlife like that for you or for the people who've donated materials.
That's a tricky one. I mean, there's moments in there that are, you know, extraordinarily powerful things in there. And, you know, as much as I say we call joy, there also needs to be sadness and remembrance and moments of horror. And, you know, and some of the material we're getting around HIV/AIDS is obviously very, very, very powerful. There's one set of diaries that came in of a person who lost their partner to HIV about 1990, but documented their illness to the last minute. And the diaries are photographic pictures of, you know, this person's last moments. And there's recorded this relationship from 10 years before. So you see this very, very attractive man with moustache, full figure, you know, quite macho, reduced to a skeleton on his bed. And, you know, I said to the person who deposited, you know, is this traumatic? They're like, of course it's traumatic. This was the woman, the person's sister, because I knew them both I want that to be there as a record, because to me, that set of photos would tell everyone more about the devastation that illness caused than any academic work you could read. Just looking at that to that, and the effect it had on that person is, I think a valid reason to have that there, even though, God, Barbara was in tears, kind of looking at it, and I was like, trying to hold it together. But, it needs to be there. And we say to people that this is going to be a traumatic thing for you, but I'm not going to once again shy away from people seeing that, because lots of other examples like that.
There's a question, in the person, and then we'll come back again. Hi. What are some of the earliest pieces that you have in the archive?
Not that early, unfortunately. All sort of probably 40s. And once again, it's the sort of quite more subjective material, so some of the early physique stuff. We have a few books, the older books that are talked about, as classics. I would say probably in the 40s, 50s, really, and there's enough there from then on, really. So it's definitely not an old historical archive, it's predominantly 50s onwards. The press patterns are quite good. They go back to the sort of Victorian period. Thank God to all those volunteers that did all that backtracking. There's always a trickiness with the older records, because you're subjectively putting sexual identity or sexuality on someone, sometimes obvious, sometimes not. Whereas a lot of the connections we have, people say, I'm out and proud. So, yeah, I'd love to say 1381. No orgy. No, unfortunately. Oh.
Hi, I have a question. So, Bishopsgate isn't the only collecting centre for queer history and experience in the UK. Is there any attempts to kind of come together to make the whole collecting process less overlap, less silos? Or what do you think differentiate Bishopsgate from let's say Made Queer Britain or the whole Carpenter's Archive?
I mean, in the ideal world, I'd love every archive around the country to have its own big bit, and there was definitely a move towards that with Heritage Lottery funding and projects taking place locally. There was a lot more people saying, whether for good or bad, we need more LGBTQ history in our archive in Kent and Plymouth and Devon, which was great. So I'd love it to be dispersed, so Manchester is a great queer archive, Scotland's a great archive. Fortunately, archives are like, it's not going to happen. Unfortunately, unless something amazing happens with lots of money, but job, that's good fun. And I think it's a case of, the job is trying to save as much as you can. I mean, I'm always happy, the sun comes from Manchester, comes into Keene, you can go to London, go to Manchester, and move to Manchester. I think the difference with us is two things particularly. I think there's a difference between Queer Britain Museum, which is telling a story. We're not trying to tell a story. I'm not telling you what the history of Queer Britain is in a linear form. I wouldn't dare do that, because everyone has a completely different experience of what their queer life was like. Terrifies the life out of me. Also, I'd say for difference, just one ridiculous freedom I get given to collect stuff that maybe would be tricky to collect elsewhere. And the fact that a lot of those places have to go to an acquisitions committee board meeting, convince my trustees that, Midland Link Motor Sports Club, Fetish Club is a good archive acquisition to take in. So I think that having the freedom that I've had, thank God, has enabled that to blossom.
Sounds like you're not had to make your decisions so quickly as well. You couldn't go to a committee. You get a call and someone's clearing out their house and you've got something there and ready to engage straight away. That would be a barrier.
It would, yeah. So and I'm always thankful that I did get that because it's rare. It's good around that one quite nicely. But amazing, more the better, that's what I say. Oh my God.
And then we might sort of let you have a glass of wine.
So I'll keep you off the wine. This is probably a problem for all archives. It's that more and more stuff is just moving online. Meetings that used to keep minutes and so on, very interesting years later. Now they just send an email around, and so that's all lost. Even publications, they changed the web page last year, last week's edition, not whatever it was. How are you coping with stuff like that?
Not really. It's tricky, but what we do, we record websites of groups that are specifically out for physical archive as well. So there's wonderful things the British Library do. I think they're still doing the website capture project, where they capture websites of various periods. So much. I mean, I often say to people, because I'm old and quite grumpy, I say, are we going to be the generation that doesn't have a box of photo albums under the bed? Because everything's on Instagram now. So when Instagram goes, cuts it all off. So I'm interested to see how this pans out. They're not again, so I don't care. But these things operate in the future. A lot of challenges. I remember when I did the archive course in 2001, they said archives will be completely digital by 2005. As I looked into the BBC microcomputer, it's not quite worked out, but I think there's a lot of amazing people coming through all the groups.
Well, I think it's time to start to draw this part of the evening to a close. First of all, I wanted to say thank you to all of you, because it's been a lovely room, really brilliant audience, and some fantastic questions that you put into Stef. So thank you all for coming and for your really lively and thoughtful engagement with Stef's talks this evening. In a moment, we're going to go upstairs to the common room. Hopefully the wine is there already. If it's not, it'll be there any second now, so don't go anywhere. It will arrive. Perhaps one of my colleagues, maybe Justin, you could kind of lead the way up there to make sure people find their way. So of course, to end the formal part of this evening, just by thanking Stef again for really superb, inspiring, thought-provoking